scent of incense lingered, but it could not mask the stench of decay. King Arakan lay motionless, his frail body barely rising with each shallow breath. The golden glow of the chamber flickered as Prime Minister Rhen Jorath watched in silence. "Where is my son?" the king rasped. Prince Darien stepped forward, his royal robes too large, his fists clenched. He did not meet his father's gaze. "He is ready to inherit your legacy," Rhen murmured, resting a hand on Darien's shoulder. Arakan's breath hitched. His clouded eyes sharpened for a fleeting moment. "The kingdom will burn." Rhen smirked. "Yes. It will." Beyond the palace, fires of revolution flickered. The shadow of the dying king had begun. The shadows of the dying king. The palace lay in silence, broken only by the rasp of the dying king's breath. King Arakan slumped upon his golden throne, his crown askew on his withered brow. Shadows pooled in his sunken eyes as his fingers twitched, grasping for something long lost. Lord Rhen Jorath leaned in, his whisper a coil of silk and steel. "Fear not, my king. Your son will rule, as you have always wished." Darien. The boy of vacant eyes, now little more than a puppet in Rhen's grasp, from the shadows, Princess Elira watched, her pulse quickening. The kingdom had never truly belonged to the king. And if she did not act soon, it never would again. The air in the royal archives was thick with dust and silence. Candlelight flickered against endless shelves of forgotten histories, casting restless shadows along the stone walls. Elira's hands trembled as she unrolled the ancient parchment. The ink had faded, the edges frayed with time, but the words struck like a blade: "The true King Arakan is dead. The man upon the throne is an impostor." Her breath caught. A lifetime of certainty shattered in an instant. Behind her, the air shifted. A presence. Watching. Waiting, Elira turned, the parchment crumpling in her grip. But the darkness held its secrets, and the silence did not break. Rain hammered the stone streets, washing blood into the gutters. Commander Kale Renvar knelt, breath ragged, pain lancing through his side. His men, his brothers in arms, marched past, their boots splashing through crimson puddles. Not one looked back. Betrayal tasted like iron on his tongue. A blade had torn through his ribs, warm blood seeped into the mud. They had left him for dead, but he wasn't dead. Not yet. With a growl, Kale braced against the agony and pushed himself up, staggering into the shadows. The underground called to him now, the last refuge of the forsaken. Firelight danced against damp stone walls, casting shifting shapes across the cavernous hideout. The air carried the scent of smoke, steel, and secrecy. Kale Renvar sat on the cold floor, his wounds hastily bandaged. Across from him, a hooded figure emerged from the shadows, face hidden, voice calm yet edged with steel. "You were betrayed. Left to die." A gloved hand extended toward him. "But you are not dead. Not yet." Kale met the masked gaze, his fists tightening. "Join us. Fight with us." Revenge burned through his veins. Slowly, he took the offered hand. Trumpets blared. Golden banners draped the grand hall. The weight of the kingdom pressed upon Prince Darien's shoulders. He stood before the kneeling council, his face a mask of quiet vacancy as the jeweled crown settled upon his brow. Applause thundered, but it was distant, muted, unreal. The world blurred at the edges. Behind him, Lord Rhen Jorath watched, his expression unreadable. His hand lingered just behind Darien's throne, close enough to guide, to control. The boy king did not resist. He had been crowned. But he did not rule. The fires of rebellion burned on the horizon. General Tavik Van sat astride his warhorse, his armored grip tightening on the reins. Before him, the path split. On one side, his soldiers, loyal and waiting. On the other, the ragged force of revolutionaries, defiant despite the odds. Orders echoed in his mind. Crush them. End this, but doubt gnawed at him. He had seen the rod in the palace, the lies whispered as truth. The choice loomed before him, obedience or defiance, order or chaos. The fate of Voranai trembled in his hands. Moonlight spilled through silk-draped windows, tracing silver lines across the marble floor. The noble snored softly, unaware. A shadow moved. Silent. Precise, the Phantom Order's assassin slipped closer, dagger glinting in the dim glow. One breath. One strike. The blade kissed flesh, and the noble jerked, choking on his final gasp. By dawn, Lord Rhen Jorath struck back. His decree was swift, merciless. For every noble slain, 100 rebels will burn, the streets filled with soldiers. The prisons overflowed. The city trembled, the war had begun. Candlelight flickered against stone, shadows twisting on the damp walls. Elira's breath was unsteady as she leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. The king is an imposter. Cale tensed, his wounded body rigid, but his eyes burned with something new, something dangerous. If this is true, he murmured, inches from her, then Rhen Jorath has ruled far longer than we thought. Elira nodded. Secrets swirled between them, heavy as the air in the hidden chamber. They were alone in the dark. But for the first time, neither felt alone. The chamber was silent, save for the soft clink of ivory chess pieces against polished wood. Lord Rhen Jorath advanced a knight, his fingers lingering over the board. A slow smirk curled his lips. Strategy was an art, and war, a game best played in whispers. Across Voranai, rumors spread like fire. Lies wrapped in truth, placed with precision. General Tavik Van heard them all. The rebels planned to betray him. Cale Renvar sought his head. Even Elira could not be trusted. Doubt seeped into Tavik's mind. And doubt, Rhen knew, was the sharpest blade of all. Flames devoured the walls, smoke curling like specters in the suffocating air. Cale Renvar moved through the chaos, his blade flashing as masked figures clashed in the inferno. The Phantom Order had been betrayed, ambushed in their sanctuary. A dagger whistled past his ear. Another assassin fell, heat blistered his skin, but hesitation meant death. The fire roared, timbers groaned. The only way out was forward. With a final breath, Cale leapt, through smoke, through fire, into the unknown. The rebellion would not die tonight. Not while he still breathed. The night was thick with the scent of rain, the distant echo of war drums thrumming through the city. On the balcony, Cale and Elira stood close, their hands hovering, almost touching, yet not. Below, firelit streets whispered of bloodshed, but in the quiet, time held its breath. Elira exhaled. Will we survive this? Cale's gaze softened, his voice steady. I don't know. A pause. A heartbeat. Then, he reached for her, fingers curling over hers. And no more words. No promises, only the silent understanding that this moment, this fragile breath between war and fate, was theirs alone. Tavik stood firm before the village, silent as if holding its breath. His sword was drawn, the cold steel catching the morning light in a sharp, glinting arc behind him. His soldiers stood in perfect formation, hands gripping their weapons tightly, faces tense with anticipation. They waited for a single command that would decide the fate of this place. Before him, villagers hid behind locked doors, some peering through cracks in the wood, their eyes wide with fear, fixed on the blade in Tavik's hand. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of damp earth, smoke, and the faint, lingering trace of blood. Tavik had to choose. One order, one word, life or death. And this time, there was no turning back. The palace loomed against the night, its towers bathed in cold moonlight. A Phantom Order operative clung to the rooftop, breath steady, heart pounding. Below, guards patrolled in measured rhythm, one misstep, one sound, and death would be swift. Cale Renvar moved through the shadows, blades sheathed, his target clear. But something was wrong. The silence was too deep, the corridors too empty. Then, a shout. A trap, steel clashed. The mission was unraveling. Cale barely had time to curse before alarms rang out, and the palace came alive with the hunt. Blood stained the marble floors. The great Lord Rhen Jorath, master of whispers, architect of power, knelt in chains before his captors, blades pressed against his throat. Torches flickered, casting jagged shadows across his smirking face. You think you've won, he murmured, voice smooth as ever. Cale Renvar loomed over him, fists clenched. You finished, Jorath. The Prime Minister chuckled, low, knowing. Am I? His gaze flicked to Elira. You have no idea who truly sits upon that throne. For the first time, silence filled the room. Even in death, Rhen Jorath still played the game. Flames devoured the palace, embers swirling like fireflies in the smoke-choked sky. The gates, once unbreakable, shattered beneath the force of the revolution. Kale Renvar led the charge, sword flashing, his voice drowned in the battle cry of the oppressed. Arrows rained. Steel clashed. Blood slicked the marble steps as the Phantom Order carved through the last defenders. High above, royal banners burned, their golden sigils curling into ash. The monarchy was crumbling, but in the heart of the inferno, one throne still stood, waiting for its new master. The grand hall reeked of blood and smoke. Once a place of power, now a graveyard, Kale Renvar stepped over the lifeless bodies of nobles and generals, his blade slick with red. Beside him, Elira moved like a phantom, dagger tight in her grip. The whispers of dying men faded beneath the crackling flames. The throne loomed ahead. Empty. Waiting. A figure stirred in the shadows. Not all had fallen. Betrayal still lurked in these halls. The battle was not yet won. The throne room lay in ruin. Smoke curled through shattered columns, and blood pooled beneath Rhen Jorath as he slumped against the cold marble. Breath shallow, Kale loomed over him, blade still dripping. Elira knelt close, her voice sharp. "It's over, Jorath." But the dying man only chuckled, a wet, broken sound. His lips curled into a final smirk. "Fools." A ragged breath. A whisper. "You think you've won? The real ruler has yet to come." His eyes glazed. His smirk remained, then, his silence, and with it, a new, more terrifying uncertainty. The throne, bathed in blood and firelight, was no longer empty. Prince Darien sat upon it, golden robe streaked with ash, his crown slightly askew. His hands rested neatly in his lap, fingers tapping a slow, thoughtful rhythm. Kale and Elira stood frozen at the threshold. The war was won. The tyrant was dead, and yet, as Darien lifted his gaze, an eerily calm, unnervingly knowing smile curved his lips. "Did you truly think I was just a pawn?" Outside, the fires raged. Inside, a new game had already begun. The city burned, flames licking the sky like hungry gods. From the shadows of a ruined balcony, Master Alric Vile watched in silence. The revolution had come. The tyrants had fallen. And yet, power had merely changed hands. The Phantom Order, once united, fractured. Some hailed victory. Others whispered betrayal. Had they fought for freedom, or simply cleared the path for another throne? Alric's gaze drifted toward the palace, where Darien sat, smiling in the firelight. The game was not over. It had only just begun. The first light of dawn broke over Voranai, casting long shadows across the ruined palace. A lone banner, the sigil of the revolution, fluttered in the cold morning wind, its crimson fabric stained with ash and blood. The war was won. The old regime had fallen. Yet as Kale and Elira stood amidst the wreckage, they felt no triumph, only the weight of what had been lost. From the shattered throne room, Prince Darien watched in silence. The revolution had changed everything, and yet, power remained. A new dawn had come. But was it truly a new world?